Hello and welcome back to another episode of Just 5 Minutes. And on this episode we're going to be looking at gRPC. So again, if you've picked up on in the .NET world, in Microsoft .NET, you've probably heard with .NET Core, gRPC was vaunted a little while ago. Actually been probably about a year or so now, I think. But what is it? Right, well, RPC, I guess, is remote procedure call. So back in the day, you can imagine if you had to make a call to well, in this example, a DLL, so if you have to make a call to some sort of DLL that is not on your computer. So again, we're not talking web, but we'll come to that in a sec. But what you had to do is from the client, you could make that call, but the actual objects, if you like, the code, the method, existed on a different server on the network. So realistically, that's what RPC is. It's literally what it says, remote procedure call. The G bit, where does G come into it, the gRPC? Well, that's because essentially Google developed this back in around about 2015, and it uses the HTTP2 transport layer, and essentially the way it differs, in my opinion anyway, to something like, say, SOAP or REST, which are primarily, not always, but primarily for web technologies. This is a very strict low-level protocol, basically. And funny enough, it uses something called protocol buffers, which is essentially a method of serializing structured data. And it's usually also binary. It supports authentication. It also supports synchronous or asynchronous and bidirectional. So you can have it unary-cast, multicast, etc., etc. So it's essentially a very tightly defined interface, and it uses, that's exactly it. It uses protocol buffers for the interface description language. So why would you use it as like REST or something? Well, REST, you've got, you have to understand, well, what does the REST interface look like? It's going to differ from everyone, the way that it's implemented, the way that authentication works. But with gRPC, it's a very strict set of methods, basically, that you can work with. And again, it's usually used at low level when you're not consuming sort of web services, but you want very fast communication between two objects, basically, two applications. It is being used more and more with microservices as well because of that nature. So it's a really interesting subject. It has been around, like I say, the concept of RPC has been around for absolutely ages and ages. But you can sort of see why, because it actually does a really good job of compressing the data, and because it's got a very limited strict sort of interface, it can do that. So everything that goes across the wire is the bare minimum. It's absolutely compressed binary data, gets it over to where you want it to go, but not to be confused, like I say, with SOAP or REST. However, there are, and there have been for a while now, something, and I forget the exact name, but it's essentially gRPC for the web. Now, browsers themselves don't talk, even though they can talk HTTP2, they don't talk gRPC with the functionality that we've just talked about. However, there is moves, and like I say, it has been for a while again, and in the .NET Core community, it's getting some traction as well, where there is something called gRPC Web that lets essentially web-based clients, Angular, React Vue, whatever it might be, just plain old JavaScript, talk to gRPC servers. So there's always a client and a server type interaction going on, but as I say, it's primarily between low-level, sort of server to server rather than a web application. So it's actually really interesting to have a little read, and I'm sure it's going to be serving up more and more with with microservices as it has been for a long time. But yeah, check out the links below. There's certainly more information on there, and we'll see you next time for another episode.